So today I feel like reviewing, I don't know. What do you think?
I haven't really given it much thought this time. What do you want to review? Beer by the Numbers?
Hey, this is Ryan from Beer by the Numbers, and today I feel like reviewing a classic 80s horror movie, Hellraiser, as well as Oktoberfest by Sierra Nevada.
We'll tear your soul apart.
So this film is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and since it's almost Halloween, I figured this would be a great one to review with you guys. Pip and Kay, you guys have seen this classic horror movie before, right?
Yeah, I've watched this several times. Actually, I remember the first time me and my buddy rented it, and the scariest part of the movie was at the beginning and the end. There was this infomercial with an old lady. It was really bizarre, and I haven't seen it since, but that freaked me out more than anything. And actually, that was also the first time that I ever tried a beer.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, how old were you?
Good stuff, guys. Let's get started. So the movie opens with this guy buying a cursed item from a sketchy dealer in Tunisia. You know, that classic horror movie trope. But in this case, the guy's name is Frank, and the object in question is a really sketchy puzzle box. After the deal, they immediately cut to Frank in this bare attic in a house surrounded by candles, and he's trying to solve the puzzle box. Now, how he actually knew what the heck to do with this crazy rituals is really beyond me, but anyway, he continues to try, and when he finally gets this puzzle box solved, a bunch of crazy 80s sparks fly out everywhere, and a bunch of meat hooks come out of nowhere and start digging into him. And guys, I don't know what you think, but it really just looked like they fish hooked a big ham hock here. What do you guys think of this effect? Did it hold up very well?
I think it's pretty effective. It's gross, and
It's pretty nasty. I mean, it sets you up for what's going to be a pretty gruesome film. And if there's a lesson to be learned from all this, it's don't play with puzzles. Don't try to better yourself by learning things. Just stay dumb.
play video games.
You won't have to deal with that.
So now we skip forward, and Frank's brother Larry and his wife Julia are moving into the house with the attic, and Julia's not too thrilled. But then Larry gets a call from his daughter Kirsty.
Meanwhile, we see Julia go through some old photos Frank had lying around, and we learn that Frank and Julia had an affair before she even married Larry. And she can't stop thinking about her affair with Frank and imagining it. Pip and Kay, what did you guys think of all these weird flashbacks in the beginning?
Adultery is bad. Having sex with Frank will make you sad. It'll turn you into an axe murderer.
Back to the movie, Larry cuts his hand while moving a bed, and then he walks into the creepy room. Some of his blood spills on the floor. Then we get a shot of the blood seeping into the floorboards, and then slowly it starts reviving Frank as some crazy skinless corpse in what is probably one of the most dramatic resurrection scenes you're ever gonna see in a movie. Then we cut forward again to a scene a few days later where Larry is recounting his experience at the hospital to a bunch of friends at a dinner party. And everybody is like really weirdly half drunk. And I don't know about you guys, but have you ever had a dinner party turn into something this awkward?
This pretty much describes every Thanksgiving I've ever had, where like half of my family is super drunk and the other half is completely sober. So if you kind of like blend it, then everyone is half drunk. It's all very weird, but there's turkey.
The dinner party is extremely awkward, and the one feeling this most of all is Julia.
It's a horrible dinner party, so she wants to get out.
She excuses herself, goes up to bed, but she hears a noise from the attic. And when she goes to investigate, it's Frank. And he starts bringing up their past relationship and how she promised him that she would do anything for him. So he convinces her to supply him with bodies because he needs the blood to rejuvenate.
Right, he wants to be less disgusting looking. And frankly, he's pretty gross. Frankly. Okay.
So then they cut to the next day, and Julia goes out and picks up a guy at a bar, and then she leads him back to the house, and they go upstairs to the attic, and the dude is like, all right, an attic's a little weird, but whatever. I'm fine with some kinky stuff as long as it's not too over the top. But then Julia comes up and so Larry talks to his daughter Christy about Julia, and Christy starts spying on Julia, and she sees her leading a man into the house. Christy hears a commotion coming from inside the house and goes in after to investigate. Well, she of course finds Frank, who promptly starts attacking her. So now we have my absolute favorite scene in the movie. Christy goes inside this crazy portal in the wall and walks down this really long, creepy corridor. She finds this crazy two-headed monster and starts running back in what has to be one of the longest straight line chases you're ever going to see in a movie. They just keep cutting back and forth to her running and the monster, and her running and the monster, her running and the monster, to her running and the monster. But she manages to barely escape, but unfortunately for her, a bunch of Cenobites show up, and the leader of the Cenobites, a dude named Pinhead, tells Kirsty that they're going to take her to their creepy, sadomasochistic realm of torture and terror. Christy's a pretty quick thinker and tells them that Frank is trying to restore his body and escape from them, and that
I can lead you to him, and you can take him back instead of me.
Perhaps we prefer you. I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe. But if you hate us, we'll tear your soul apart.
Kirsty returns home and she finds a dead, skinless body on the floor.
Gross.
Now Julia's there and she tries to convince her that it's Frank, her uncle. But the Cenobites show up and they're not having it. They know that's Larry, her father.
Hell no.
So Kirsty runs out to confront the real Frank
Yeah.
and Julia, and Frank gets pissed. So he goes to stab her, but ends up stabbing Julia instead. And he don't care. He just wants blood.
He wants that delicious strawberry juice.
So Kirsty runs upstairs and Frank is forcing her back up into the attic.
unfortunately for Frank, Pinhead and his goons are there waiting for him, and they're not going to let him escape this time. Frank tries to stab Kirsty in anger, but he is stopped by a Cenobite meat hook, at which point the Cenobites start ripping apart Frank for the second time as he stares very, very creepily at Kirsty. Finally, we cut back to the market where Frank first bought the box, and another man is about to buy the box, thus setting into motion even more Cenobite adventures, and leaving it open for a sequel, believe it or not. Overall, this is a pretty classic 1980s horror movie. You know, the gore and some of the special effects don't quite stand the test of time perfectly, but the really interesting villains and plot line keep everything moving along just fine. And so does having a good beer. What did you guys think of the movie overall?
This is a classic 80s horror film. And while it is classic, it's not necessarily conventional. Because when I think of 80s horror, I think of Freddy or Jason. And where in those movies it's one monster where people have to escape from them, this is not one monster. It's the Cenobites. It's an entire dimension of horror which people have to deal with.
Yeah, and this actually has more of a backbone of an idea where it deals with this weird relationship thing. It feels a lot more like a novel, which makes sense because Clive Barker directed it. Clive Barker is the one who wrote the book that this is based off of. So
the Sierra Nevada Oktoberfest, a pretty good Märzen style beer. Obviously, it's very, very clear in the glass, well carbonated, has nice head retention to if you're enjoying it throughout a rendition of Hellraiser or any other 80s horror movie. On the nose, you get a lot of the classic Märzen caramely malt flavors. Actually, in this particular one, you get a lot of just basic wheat coming through as well, probably why it looks so clean. And just a teeny bit of hop on the nose, and then you had a nice light-bodied beer. Obviously, going to be very good for tailgates or anytime you're looking not to just fill up or drink a few of these. Although I wouldn't quite call it a session beer at 6%. That's a pretty good one. But for a fall beer, it's definitely not super heavy. Mostly caramel flavors. You get a little bit of weediness in there as well. It doesn't have a super strong nasal component, so it's really, really just light and crisp drinking. And then just a teeny bit of hop bitterness on the back end. It's a collab beer with a craft brewery in Germany, so I'm assuming whatever hops they use, they're noble hops and not any of our crazy piney citrusy American cousins. But overall, I think it's a pretty good B-level beer, and it's available almost anywhere. So as far as something to pick up, definitely worth a shot. What do you think, guys?
Absolutely. We definitely agree. There's a lot of caramel flavor in this. Makes for great fall beer. Cheers.
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 Pip and Kay, thank you so much for letting me sit down and do a horror movie review with you guys. It was much appreciated, and I had a blast. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Ryan. This has been an absolute joy to work with you. Any of you viewers at home who like this, definitely check out his channel, Beer by the Numbers. We actually just finished a video with him, top 5 beer-related movies, which was awesome.
Super fun.
So check that out. We'll have a link in the end cards and down below in the description. And that concludes our video. Thanks for watching Review and Brew, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.